Of the UAE Pavilion's talk series, Dreamers Dialogues. I'm your host, Leila bin Break, the coordinating director for the UAE Pavilion at the Venice Biennale. And in today's segment, we're going to talk about creative expression. But before we start, I think we have a few words from Her Excellency Noor Al-Kaabi, the Minister for Culture and Youth.
Hello. Thank you, Leila. It's a pleasure. It's wonderful to have you here today. I sincerely apologize for the delay. We're kind of not just Commissioner Generals, but we're kind of doctors on call when it comes to the way we work here. I think we're enjoying let's say, the countdown of the wrap-up of Expo. Yes, we're going to miss it. And I believe that having you here today is also a testament of your contributions. As you know, this pavilion is a pavilion that talks about dreamers and dreamers who do. And you embody that. You embody that in terms of what this nation represents. We celebrated 50 years. There is, the next 50 years and how the next generation are an essential part of that. And I believe our talk today is going to focus on that in the future and how the youth play a very strong role in terms of how what we aspire and how they inspire us as well. At this forum, we will be focusing on children's future, as mentioned, and the generation of the dreamers. And of course, through our keynote speakers and panels, we'll be showing how we can engage and nurture young creative talent within the community. And I have to say that I think with my experience at the ministry, but more, I think in a practical terms, is the experience that I go through at Zayed University. You operate differently when you work in an institution that deals with education and the outcome of education, or the way we teach and what we teach, and is it obsolete? So I have a story to share. I went to UAE University at the business college, so I graduated from business college, and we, they were showing us the majors, and I was like, oh yeah, but you missed showing me the MIS major. I said, no, we don't have it anymore. I said, what do you mean you don't have it? Because I graduated MIS. He said, yeah, now it's a subject. So, so for 4 years, I studied a subject, okay, or 3 years. And that just, kind of shows the evolution of everything we do and how we are, specifically in the UAE, we are in a very kind of a fast pace here in terms of how we're trying to achieve things. And I was just walking in and Taimur was saying, I'm doing this, it's last minute. I said, yeah, get used to it. Everything is either last minute. When we are planning, I said, we're planning and we're working at the same time. It's all at the same time. So I think it's the spirit, and I think it's the culture that we manifest in terms of the things we do. But again, at the same time, how do we do it? So your involvement is an important way of building the nation, and it starts, and it definitely starts with youth, even before they graduate. The future of culture and creative industry is front and center in every discussion we carry forward. And now we may enable the UAE to boast a vibrant cultural sphere, which will also contribute substantially to the local and global creative economy. Last year we did announce our creative and cultural agenda, and how this is not just a sector that we enjoy and we enrich, and it enriches us, but it's also a sector that contributes to the economy, diversify it, contributes to the GDP, and by the way, and that gives you a very good seat on the table. So this is what we're working towards. We're working in terms of even measuring the industry, and when you measure the industry, you know the size of it, and when you know the size of it, you work on a legislative framework that speaks or understands it and makes it better. The youth are very much part of, for the nation's onward march to the future. And now our national vision is very futuristic. And the role of the youth is integral to the vision and the involvement of the nation building. And how we nurture young creative talents within the community is very crucial to our progress in such creative realm. I welcome each one of you. I really makes me happy to see such familiar faces. I call it a family, not just a community. And I really look forward to the series of dialogue. So thank you for being here, and thank you for everything you're doing and your contributions to the land of dreamers who do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Great. So we have some of the dreamers who do, some of these individuals who make up our creative economy, which is a buzzword that we're hearing a lot of today. So we're going to try and hear some of their individual stories. Let me introduce quickly the panel. We have Mohammed Samji, Director of Gulf Photo Plus. What is your 1-minute elevator pitch? If you had 1 second with her.
Now, there's, the serious talk of policy framework, what we're doing, enabling the sector, measuring it and everything. But I think, just to cut it short, I mean, I was just before the meeting, I saw a talent of the UAE that is curating a Saudi pavilion, the National Saudi Pavilion in Venice, Rim Fadla. And that by itself is a strong story, a story of us in the UAE, how we're also not just contributing within the scene of the UAE or the creative scene in the UAE, but how our talents are as well contributing to enrich the scene, transcending the border of just the UAE. So I think luckily I've been part of my previous work before the federal work with 2454 and working with creatives as just, trying and yes. Okay. So I think it's yeah. Maybe it's ticking bombs. So I think the creative industry is just about how you nurture the talent and how you welcome the talent. And make them feel like home and treat each one of them as as an individual who is contributing and who is part of such scene. So yeah.
Oh, hello. Okay, so this is from Her Excellency, more of a ministerial overlook. I'd like to kind of, for those who are actually in the scene, let's call it, yourselves, what do you feel from what you've observed over the last couple of years? Maybe Samji, we'll start with you because, you've been around for, one, you had a very different career beforehand, but in terms of, let's just say the last 10 years of your involvement with Gulf Photo Plus and seeing things as a photographer, what does the cultural economy mean for you, and what do you think are the markers to make this? And do you think we're being successful? What can we do to move it forward?
So when I left the corporate world to become a photographer, I think a lot of what Gulf Photo Plus does today is what I found to be missing at that time. There was no network or hub or even a place where there were educational resources or a place to exhibit work or a place to learn from others. And so I think really what shapes and defines what we do at GPP is to be able to facilitate the nurturing and growth of photographers or people working with images, to help them. I think we've come a long way. I think there's a lot of maturity in the creative industry, but I think there's still a lot of work to do. There is still this ongoing challenge to get people, within the private sector, public sector, to respect the creative field. There's a big gap there, but I feel that there is this energy and a lot of people are pushing that. And I think many individuals in this room, for example, are fighting that good fight on a daily basis. And, when we're starting to get support from, the Ministry of Culture, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. But it's definitely, the things that weren't there 10 years ago are starting to be there, and there's forums or places that you can go and ask for things to be done differently.
Hello? Okay. Sorry, it feels this is going to make it more interesting today, these mics. Khulud, why don't you, it would be really great to also hear from you. Tinka has also been around for a while. If you can tell us, I know you were involved in some of the kind of branding of this idea of cultural heritage, especially around the UAE Pavilion. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about your journey and how did you tackle that particular challenge?
So Tinka's going to complete 10 years next week, actually, and it's been a beautiful journey. It's not a smooth journey. You have to go through the speed bumps to be able to get to where you want to be. I think to be more specific about the work that we have done for the UAE Pavilion. With Tinka in general, our main focus is to want to establish our design language. What is UAE's design language? And we strive for projects that let us to allow to do that. And luckily with the UAE Pavilion, we got that opportunity. The ask was, how could we, represent the UAE within the logo being one part of the experience, but there are other aspects in the brand that would build up and translating who we are as, the hosting pavilion. So there was, as part of the process, it was interesting to collaborate with different people from different backgrounds and experiences to be able to do that. I do not see any challenges. At the end of the day, I'm a designer, I'm a problem solver. We strive for solving for things. We use design as a way to creatively respond back to things, whether it's related to a brand or it's related to responding back to an experience or to a product. We always take it as a problem-solving matter that would add value to the sector.
Oh, great! Thank you so much, Sarah. Maybe you can also, as an artist and curator and educator, can you give us your take on what does this creative economy mean for you in your practice, and also in maybe the work that you do as well?
Sure. I think it's also important to acknowledge the fact that, as Mohammed was saying, there was no blueprint, so we didn't have much of a point of departure or a point of departure from which we could depart from. So in a way, we were asking our own questions and then answering them as well at the same time. And I think the most important thing, at least in the art field, was to have that innate curiosity and to constantly question why. So the art practice and the creative industry, as well as the art scene, has definitely transformed. But then again, the UAE in general has galvanized throughout the ages. So art and design and culture, which sort of sits at the apex of those three things, is a direct reflection of civic society. So it cannot function and it cannot move without society's input. And so as we are sort of changing and evolving, so is the landscape. And so there are things that we become interested in, there's things that we're trying to represent, but a lot of the time, we know that the UAE in general is a multicultural melting pot of so many different diverse nationalities, ethnicities. And so in essence, that scene or that creative economy is a byproduct of that sort of transient nature. And so it definitely will evolve and it will continue to evolve. It's not static by any means, and that sort of echoes what these other two panelists have said. But I think I want to go back to what Mohammed said about trusting in the people of the UAE to be able to deliver on these creative endeavors, that it's no longer seeking external validation or playing into a Western lens, but rather really allowing for the undercurrent of the UAE to become the overcurrent and to really work hand in hand to marry the two, whether it's top-down versus bottom-up or, as I said, underground versus overground in terms of the art and design industry, and to really believe that we are able to external view, mirrored back to us. So I think that is, in essence, my TED Talk.
Okay. Well, I can't wait to see that TED Talk. No, you've raised some really good points there, and we're going to get back to them. But I want to give Isa a chance to also answer that from your perspective as well, since you're kind of...
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting. I don't want to kind of repeat what my
Do it.
my colleagues have said, but I do echo their points. I think one of my back when I started my journey into product design, I think it's kind of a unique journey because I didn't have a lot of peers around me. It was something new, so my inspiration had to be kind of external and outside the UAE. Thankfully, that's changing, a lot. I have so many amazing peers and product designers that are based in the UAE, whether Emiratis or anyone who calls the UAE home, and I do find inspiration within them. So that piece of it is there, and that's great, and that's an improvement, at least for my field. I think the part where kind of we can work together, and part of why we participate in these kind of talks and panels is because we want to inspire, I think, others, but like in a very humble way, because I would love nothing more than to have so many other product designers who have their own take on things. I think I love, Your Excellency, what you said about starting to export our knowledge, and I really do believe that each one of us, there is a point of view that comes from this country, from this region, from its inhabitants. We have something special to say and to show the world, and I would love nothing more than to see that applied to all of these different creative disciplines. So I went on a tangent there, but yeah.
We love tangents, so don't worry. You can continue going. I think, so I guess what I want to ask you next, I mean, we've talked about being a mentor, inspirations. We'll get into the mentorship question in a minute, but it would be really helpful, I think, for people who are viewing, if each one of you could share maybe a key moment for you, let's say, that kind of really either, Aisa, like what inspired you to take that leap and start your own design, or Mohammed to like leave the corporate world and actually pursue photography. Like, I think it would be really interesting if each one of you could share either a story that we can share, to kind of as an example, or even just a moment where you either met someone or read someone that kind of inspired you that you're on the right path. Whoever wants to go first.
For me, my journey started since high school, actually. I always knew that I wanted to work with my hands. I was more about being practical about things rather than just purely analytical. And then I majored in visual communication, and after graduating, I felt like my options were limited. And I didn't fit in any of the sectors that were in front of me, either go and work for an advertising agency or go for a development company and give my creative services for. And from there, some freelancing opportunities came up, and that's when me and two of my partners decided to join forces and see where the path is going to take us. One core aspect that, as I keep repeating and saying, we focused on is we really want to define and position ourselves as Emirati design globally. We want to sit against others. We want to make sure that we are positioned there and for people to recognize what we can do, what we are all about. So when I see Swiss design, I recognize it. When I see Japanese design, I recognize it. I want the Emirati design to get the same attention as well.
So just quickly on that point, for you, which is a great aspiration, do you have certain benchmarks that you've put for yourself in place to kind of, like, how do you know you're on the right? Are there certain key milestones that you're reaching towards to achieve that goal?
So whenever we get projects, we always try to embed some aspect of cultural heritage as part of our narrative as much as we can. Because at the end of the day, to me, cultural heritage are, practices that have been passed from generation to generation, and they are part of our identity. That's what makes us different than others. That's how I can start, molding narratives and design solutions that are specific to who we are. I'm not the only one who's doing that. All of them are creatives in the field. I think we're all pitching in terms of defining what the design language is and what it's going to be. We're a young country. The sector is still young, so we're still cooking it.
That's very true. Anybody else want to share a particular key moment or in their journey?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I was growing tired of seeing things that were about us and written for us, but not by us. And so I felt as an artist, and I guess even as a curator and educator, it is our social responsibility to be able to set the tone for the future generation to walk through. And even, as an educator, when I'm teaching students in graphic design and art foundation, the first question I ask is, well, first of all, who are you? And who is the type of person that you want to become? Because if you don't know who you are, it's going to be a very difficult journey that you're going to take in your art practice or even in your design practice. And it is important for them to contextualize themselves. Contextual relevance is so important. We have museums, we have exhibitions, we have galleries, we have all of those, but what does it mean to be here in the UAE on this soil? And I think that has always been the sort of run-on question that I've had in my mind, that if we do have these experiences, as you said, with graphic design, what is Emirati design in the grand scheme of things? How is the contextual relevance going to eventually expand outwards, whether it's locally, regionally, and then internationally? And so calling into question that is just as important as finding this ongoing solution.
Okay, I have to wait until the green thing comes on. And so would you say, I love that question you're asking, students about know who you are, but I don't know, is there really just one answer? Is it not a question that you should always be asking yourself continually?
Absolutely.
And I feel like you then reflect the continual change that's happening around you.
Absolutely, but then being aware of that and allowing for, in a way, this kind of existential crisis to guide you down the path of creative righteousness. That's ultimately what it is, that we are all facing that kind of existentialism. And if funnily enough, because that was happening, that's why a vast majority of people were turning to art during the pandemic. It was a release, a way for them to express themselves beyond their sort of external limitations, that this was, in some ways transcendent. And this is something that it was a quote by somebody that I can't remember for the life of me, but they always said that, you want to find a goal that is constantly moving and ever receding as you get closer to it. Because if you continue to set goals, then there's always going to be this mountain that you cross over. There's going to be a higher mountain to get to. So you have to have a goal that's constantly receding as you move closer to it.
Great, thank you. Would you like to ask a question, Your Excellency, or would you like to answer the question yourself?
It's wonderful to hear from you when it comes to what inspires you and what makes you doing what you're doing, and I think this is where even with our going back to Sarah's point during the pandemic, and this is where for us we've noticed even as government, it has been ongoing with non-stop meetings, Zoom meetings, how we can just reallocate things and change things, and I feel that we got to know the landscape of the creatives more, even better during such a shutdown. The reason why is because it was a challenging reason. It was the reason that some of them had difficulties in terms of going on, difficulties in terms of even paying their bills. And I think, going back to the point of respecting artists or valuing their work. I do understand that this can be a challenge sometimes, and this is where always we have a joke. The first budget to be cut is our budget, or the only budget that is not increasing is our budget again. So and this is where we know that everyone wants to enjoy a beautiful painting or a beautiful design and a beautiful way of, yet, it takes investment and it takes support. So this is where, when we announced the relief fund, this is for us where we started understanding the behavior of how they evolved their business, changed their business. But for us, what's more importantly, we didn't ask the question of, yeah, but what will happen if it didn't work out? Because, we didn't want the goal to be, we're going to wire the money, but you need to continue staying here in the UAE, or you need to, do projects, or you need to, whatever it is. No, it wasn't that. It was, there you go. And there was a second round, but again, it surfaced other challenges. It surfaced the challenge of how a freelancer get the work from a government or private entity, and how this is being also, put in a better framework, in a way that protects artists. I'm also happy that we're now having more policies when it comes to IP protection. We need to do more awareness. We need to give this kind of the mentorship can be a mentorship that supports and inspires designers, but again, at the same time, another layer of protecting it. And then there's the third layer, which I was the past few days, where we were discussing some generic education that goes into a university. And we're questioning certain subjects. And I said, yeah, but I think the generic topic now, instead, let's say, of whatever, Arabic language, and university, it should be the blockchain language. Why is it the blockchain language? Because my artists, they will also have, the graduates, they need to also understand that space, understand the blockchain space, understand the crypto space, the NFT space, for them to be able to talk to two worlds, not just to one world. So yeah, I just wanted to add that because it's a point of listening and understanding how this can be, a way of creatives connecting with one another, elevating the work because of how the exchange is happening, how the quality of work, yet most importantly, how we see areas that are that gets maybe decision makers, patrons of art or creative industry say, okay, you know what? I want to invest more. I want to give more. And I think that is the challenge we have now. The challenge that we have now is patrons of such creative industries. We have few of them. Abdul Manam al-Sarkal is someone I respect immensely. And I think because of him, we've been having organic growth. The Sheikh Salama Foundation, and in terms of what's happening and the education process that is going through it, what we need is we need more patrons to also support the work that we're doing, because that is a challenge that I hope that we will overcome, because now we have a stronger case. And the stronger case is the quality of work that comes from such people and the talents we have in the country.
Great, thank you. I think definitely, I think we can all agree there are definitely a lot of challenges, and different individuals versus entities versus patrons, we all have a role towards tackling them. And, as both Khulud and Sarah mentioned, these challenges never really go away. They just keep, you solve one and another one comes along. So we should always be vigilant for those kind of things and for the constant change. I mean, it would be great if we had in even our education in schools, history about the Emirati artists, for example, is something I would like to propose. I'm sure it's going to happen for sure. But I mean, I guess with, this is, you have a whole different mandate, which is an amazing one and a very big weight to carry. But as individuals, like as people who are practicing and working every day, I mean, maybe Mohammed, do you want to add to the conversation or share kind of an insight or a special key moment of mentorship that made you move forward?
Yeah, I mean, also to just to add to what you and what Her Excellency said, I think there are solvable challenges. I come across a lot of photographers, for example, freelancers who are struggling perhaps to get paid, things like that. There's nobody that they can complain to say, I rendered services for this person and I didn't get paid. Or even, for example, crediting, like Mahra's work is downstairs, yet there's no caption to say this is Mahra's work or Amar or, even mine for that matter. This idea that artists need to be, recognized and credited for that work. Small things like that make a big difference because then they inspire, people to say, oh, my work is being recognized. And I think, my story itself is, evident of the growth that the creative industry or the cultural industry has made, because when I was growing up, that was never a consideration. I never could have imagined that I'd be working in the scene because it didn't exist when I was growing. I wanted to be a journalist or a lawyer, and I couldn't do those things because I had to be Emirati to practice law, for example. So I studied business, and then when I worked in that sector for 10 years, there was an itch for me to do something different, and photography is where I got to. And I think, now that I'm a photographer myself, but also run a photography organization, shows the kind of development in that sector, that it's now a viable option. It's difficult, and that's why when we were all introducing ourselves, everybody is doing 1, 2, or 3 or 4 things, because it's hard to do just the one thing, even with the experience that we have, to be able to pay our bills just doing artistic photography. There are very few people. There's some artists here who I know do very well for themselves, but they are few and far between who can make an income just doing artistic work. So I think you mentioned IP protection, for example. So there are a lot of these things, and I'm glad that these things are being discussed and that there are committees who are looking as to how to address those. So.
But some of these issues too, I just want to also point out, these are issues that artists and creative around the world face in different levels and different forms. So, the issue of IP rights for artists or photographers is a constant issue, and we are facing it more rapidly, I guess, but we're also dealing with it as well. So you wanted to say something, Rex?
The law of IP protection is out there already, and it's, of course, maybe it requires more awareness in terms of the rights and in terms of how they pursue. I mean, we do get direct calls from certain artists when they feel that their work is not being credited and used now recently more in the music area more than anywhere else. And again, that takes you to another point with the publishers of music and labels and whatsoever. But I think this is what's great about it. It's maybe looking at ways to make it workable for the artist self, because there are some certain areas, even let's say in in different regions, the musician at the end of the day, they get nothing. It's so difficult with this collecting society and whatsoever. So for us, I think the advantage is, yes, it's a shame that it wasn't there, but I think the advantage is how we can at least do better and provide better. And I have to say, yesterday I was with the Prince from the Aga Khan Ismaili, and we're passing your contact details because he loves the images. So I understand that we're not there, but it's we're to be honest, we're making sure that we give the credit when they're due. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Arisa, did you want to add something to the topic?
Yeah, I think just going back to your original question about that point of kind of giving back and knowledge sharing, and I think one of the amazing things I got to do, even though it was a small thing, is give a master class in leather product design for a bunch of kids back in Abu Dhabi. And what we've done is just give them, we got everyone together, and I showed them the process of how to do it. And then I got everyone to just draw whatever product that comes to mind that is in the same realm, and then we actually picked one and we got to make it. I had to fix it a little bit, but we got to make it. And I think these types of opportunities, and like especially when it's as inventive as that and really starting small with kids, that's another way to give back. Because I wish when I was their age, I wish I had a product designer come to my school and talk to me about product design. I would have known maybe my passion much earlier in my life. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, which leads into my next kind of question for all of you. I mean, you've all mentioned one of the big challenges was one, you either didn't know anybody else who was doing the same thing as you, or you didn't know and didn't have immediate mentors, so, or a sense of community. Like, how do we fix? I mean, I know it's kind of being fixed slowly as, you know, things of, you know, one Instagram and all of these social media platforms make it much easier to know what other people are doing. But what are things that we can do? And we've done quite well, let's say, over the last 5 to 10 years. Let's say in the next 5 years, what would you hope to see happen or change? Not necessarily change, but kind of advance or improve on. Sarah, why don't you go first?
To put it, I guess, simply, I would hope for a dismantling of nepotism and an increase of meritocracy.
I don't know if we'll do that in 5 years.
That's the ideal sort of, I guess, like $1 million or million dirham request. But I think it is important to acknowledge that when you ask about the creative industry or the creative economy, that those things do exist, that nepotism is very much part of the social fabric, the cultural fabric, the tribal fabric, and that meritocracy is not necessarily foregrounded as the sort of benchmark from which we can have these conversations. And I think it goes back to this idea of trust. And so I know that for the people in my industry, we're always supporting each other and advocating for each other. So if a project doesn't go to me, then I'm going to recommend the friend that I have that I know is capable of doing that job, not because that person is my friend, but because that person has so much to offer, and because I know them, that this is going to progress. And I think it's strengthening that family. And it's interesting because when you talk about, for example, simple things like identity politics, you have two ways to unfold it. First is you either draw a large circle around the community and you go towards each other, as in you fight against each other to sort of reach this ideal form of identity, or you draw a circle around the community and you have one common goal against one thing. And I think for all of us, we've drawn a large circle around each other and decided, like, you know what, we are all in this together as a family, and we just want to help each other grow.
Which is great, but sometimes can be quite intimidating for younger generations to kind of get in there and penetrate. How would you, having said all of that, how would you advise, let's say, somebody who's just beginning their journey to know which family or which community, or even just how to get in there?
It already, I don't know about you guys, it already exists. I mean, the youth of the nation is very much there. I'd be in, closed discussions, and there'll be people that are 19, 20 years old. I mean, I'm not that old, but, they'll be much younger than I am. And these conversations are taking place. And I really believe that there is enough seat at the table for everyone to sit. So it's not like somebody is taking an opportunity away from someone else. So I think we're all helping. I mean, I was at your son's school, and that was just a simple conversation with one of the teachers. And it just happened because you want to,
Great.
do that.
Khulud, would you like to give us your dreams for the future?
I do hope to see, in terms of the creative community, to feel like it's a safe zone for them to want to practice in. I want them to feel comfortable. And for that to happen, I feel like maybe there are certain processes that exist right now are too complicated for the community, or there are certain policies that work against the community rather than help it out. I think the aspect of ownership, again, going back to IP rights, is kind of our key ticket as creatives at the end of the day. It's the intellectual thought and the intellectual process that goes into it. So I believe that when some of those things start to resolve, it's going to encourage more people to take part in establishing and being part of the community. Collaboration is a key aspect that I believe truly in as well. It's a guarantee of exchange of culture, it's a guarantee of exchange of knowledge, and the end result is always better when you work together rather than separately. So I strive to see for that to come into play as well.
That's great. And would you also, sorry. Hello? When we talk about collaborations, obviously within the UAE, at home, but also abroad, would you say that that's also very important for us to do those kind of collaborations? And if you've had that experience, would you like to share?
Yeah, I see a lot of, as I said, exchange of knowledge. The UAE Pavilion as a project had many team members on board of it. There were locally based companies as well as international based companies, and there was an exchange of culture and knowledge, and everyone gained from the other. It helped us as Tinka to pick up on key elements that helped us for the future projects as well. So it does add a lot of value.
Okay, great. Mohammed, I know you're itching to share your
No,
thoughts.
everything that they said, I think what I would add, and I'm seeing more and more of that, is professional practice development. So helping the young or the aspiring artists and cultural practitioners to help them understand basic things like how to invoice, how to negotiate with a client, how to kind of sell their work, how to approach galleries or clients to say, this is my work, please consider me. These things I think are lacking. Many there's an abundance of talent, but I think where they sometimes come undone is just the how to negotiate, how to market themselves, how to even get a photography website up, and things like that. So I think adding that to what we've talked about with IP, and also helping them understand that there is an income through this, and you may have to kind of do something else to kind of supplant that, but these are all steps in the right direction.
Great. Aisa, would you like to add?
Yes. So yes, everything that you guys have said is super valid, and it's something that I would have loved when I was growing up. I think a lot of in a lot of cases, a lot of people don't know their options and what they're able to do. So I know that we're working on this, and there are so many different mechanisms to even get you in the headspace to start thinking about what your next step is in the creative fields, and not only just identifying a passion, but how does that passion translate into real life? So all of these kind of tools, like what you said, Mohammed, just important. I didn't have any business knowledge. I had no business doing business, but it was, we live, fortunately, in such an age where everything, you can learn about anything so fast because of the internet. And yeah, so it's, even these gaps in your knowledge, you can really fill them up really fast. But taking that first step is what I think people are too afraid to take. So yeah.
So maybe your advice is to take a chance, leap off that cliff, and see where you fly to.
Honestly,
on
yes.
your creative journey, because there's a lot of ups and downs probably along the way.
100%. That's exactly what I'm saying, because from the outside it looks very polished and it's a very simple process. Usually when we see a successful project, it seems like it came out of nowhere. What's obviously not clear to people is what happened throughout these years behind the scenes, all the rough spots, all the obstacles, and it gets really ugly. And it's part of my goal is to show the ugly side of how you get to where you get to, especially in our creative industries, which is amazing. You need to fail. You need to fail. I think a lot of people don't realize that, you know, in my case, and I'm sure it's with my colleagues here, is that this was the second project I tried to start, and I started two after it. So the first one failed, the second one worked, and the third and the fourth failed. So it's not clean and easy, but if you don't try, you won't know. And you can start small, it's fine.
I think failure is a big part of the creative process, to be honest. I don't think anyone would disagree there that sometimes through failure, the most amazing insights come about, or whether it's a breakthrough in your project or relationships or whatever else. So failure is really, really important, and we shouldn't be afraid of it, but take each moment as a learning moment. I think before we wrap up, I just wanted to ask, first of all, thank all of you for coming and sharing your stories. I'm sure we could go on for much longer, but before we completely sign off, I'd like to give each of you an opportunity. Is there, again, because we do have a whole audience watching us and probably a lot of young, inspired minds, what is your last piece of advice that you would possibly like to share with them?
Starting with me, okay, yes, okay, sure.
Started with you, and we're gonna start with you again.
No worries. I mean, I guess I just talked about taking the first step. One thing that I really remember, and an advice that that really helped me a lot when I was growing up, is to set your ambitions as high as possible, and set your ambitions based on your experience, not today, but your experience in 5 or 10 years. Because if you set your ambitions based on experience today, you're really not going to aim high. So, yeah, aim high, I guess.
Great. Sarah?
Since I referred to the TED Talk in the beginning, I'll use the sort of catchphrase of the TED Talk that I did many moons ago, is that it's better to ask forgiveness than to ask permission. And that is the motto I live by. And I think that that's the way it should be for any young artist and creator.
A great motto.
Yeah.
I like that one. Khulud?
I would advise you to be like a sponge. Just absorb as much as you can, because for you to know what works and what doesn't, you need to go through taking everything in and then filtering things out. So that's the way to do it.
Every opportunity is a learning moment, basically. Yeah. Hamid?
Yeah, and I think that dovetails with what I was going to say, which is to be curious, to ask lots of questions, and to be willing to unlearn as much as you are willing to absorb and learn. To unlearn is sometimes even more important. We live in a world where sometimes criticality kind of goes out the window, and we want simple answers. And I think sometimes everything is not black or white. And I think asking those questions is a good idea.
Great, thank you. I love that you put the unlearning, because it's very true as well. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all of our guests here today, and thank you to the UAE Pavilion for hosting us.